You're listening to the Monocle Daily, first broadcast on the 24th of June 2025 on Monocle Radio. Macron heralds a united Europe as NATO summit opens in The Hague, but what line will they take on Israel? France's biggest national day of music becomes an international hit, and get stuffed, why China's competitive eating is becoming a bit of a challenge. I'm Emma Nelson, and the Monocle Daily live from Paris starts now. Hello and a very warm welcome to the Monocle Daily, coming to you live from Studio 5 at 16 Rue Bachamont in the 2nd arrondissement of Paris. I'm Emma Nelson and this is day 2 of French Week, and today my guests Delphine Dilly and Daphne Denis will discuss the day's biggest stories, including the bills come in for last year's Olympics, and guess what? They blew the budget. That's all coming up right here on the Monocle Daily. So let's be clear, I'm not sure if this is deliberate, but to have Delphine Dilly and Daphne Denis around the microphone at the same time in Rue Bachamont in Paris is either going to be a pronunciation blessing or I'm going to get this terribly wrong. May I just apologise to you both and also say bonjour, or should we say bonsoir now? Because we're in... What time in French culture is 1900 hours? Are we past apéritif time? Are we
we're
doing
bang on at apéro time.
We're bang on apéro time.
Yeah.
So what are we drinking tonight?
Well, clearly just water for
Yes,
now.
of course. How about you, Delphine? What happens at 1900 in the Dilly world?
In the Dilly world, when my son is at home, I take the train and I'm stuck in the train of suburbia.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, let's dream of apéro and see if we can lift you out of that one. Welcome both. Welcome back, Daphne. It's lovely to see you once again, and
Merci.
welcome to our new studios, our new home, which we've sort of decamped to for the last 7 days. How are you finding Paris this midsummer?
Very, very hot, but lovely.
Okay.
Enjoyable.
Lovely. And why are you enjoying it so much? Because the last time I saw you was in the Olympics, which we'll talk about in a while ago, and we were enjoying Paris for different reasons last time.
Well, this time it's just that, it's been a long winter. I'm not bored of the heat just yet. I think maybe, I'll become French and annoyed in a couple of weeks. But for now, I'm just enjoying the fact that it's, summer weather.
We're going to profit from that. I didn't introduce you properly either. You filmmaker, editor-in-chief of Tracks on Arte, and a Monocle friend. And a warm, fresh welcome to new voice around the microphone, Delphine Dilly, filmmaker, journalist, factotum, all woman to all people. Welcome. And how are you finding Paris this summer? We're finding it hot, but super fun.
Actually, this summer I'm trying not to fear the heat as much. I don't know. I've learned. I carry my little fan everywhere. I just try to enjoy the fact that the real summer is coming. And I mean, as you know, Parisians, they all leave around mid-July, end of July. So it's nice to actually enjoy Paris during this time. And yes, have drinks, and yes, enjoy your friends. And I feel Paris, I don't know, something has changed in Paris. The vibe is a bit different. It feels a bit different to me.
In a good way?
In a good way.
Lovely. Since when?
Well, I mean, of course, I observed that during the Fête de la Musique, which we'll talk about later. But I don't know. Or maybe I changed and I try to enjoy the city, which so many are grumpy about. But I try to see it with other eyes. I don't know. Maybe
I think it's definitely more fun.
Yeah.
I think something has changed, perhaps thanks to Brexit. But that's another story. We'll talk about it another day.
That's fighting talk from Daphne Denis. She knows she's in trouble for saying that. Right, while I mull over that, let's head to The Hague. Let's head to the Haus ten Bosch Palace. President Donald Trump will be spending tonight there ahead of the 2025 NATO summit. It's where we are joined from as well by Stefan de Vries, who's European Affairs correspondent for Euronews and BNR News Radio. Good afternoon, good evening, Stefan. Tell us where you are and what you can see.
Good evening, Emma. Well, I'm standing right now at the Royal Palace in The Hague, the residence of King William Alexander, and he is hosting a social dinner tonight for the heads of state and the heads of government who are now present in The Hague for the NATO summit. Amongst them, of course, the American president, Donald Trump, who will even sleep at the private residence of the king here in The Hague and will have breakfast with the king tomorrow. And all this, of course, is part of a campaign to woo Donald Trump, to make him like Europe a little bit more than he has shown since he became president in January. I'm standing in the sun, surrounded by about 30, 40 journalists from all around the world, and we're waiting the chiefs of government and the world leaders who will arrive soon for the dinner at the palace.
It's interesting that you mentioned the fact that Donald Trump is going to spend the night in the palace, and because he has in the past actually made referred to himself as the king, which quite a lot of people in America got quite cross about last week. But looking forward to seeing my very good European friends and others is what President Trump has said. And European friends and others is a rather complicated idea at the moment, isn't it, Stefan?
Yes, I think even the word friend would be a euphemism. You never know what he really means. And so they take things for certain here to give him the most royal reception that's possible in the Netherlands, in The Hague. As long as we can keep this child happy. That's a little bit the idea behind what's happening here. It was kept secret until the very last moment that Donald Trump would indeed spend the night in the Royal Palace, but there were already rumors last week. So it's all part of a PR campaign from the Europeans, from the Dutch, in order to make sure that Donald Trump tomorrow at the NATO summit will agree on the conclusions and that he will somehow say that he will stay in NATO to reassure the European allies. At the same time, the Europeans know very well that the alliance that we relied on for the last 75, 80 years, the dependence on American defense, that is basically gone. It's, of course, still there, but in the minds of many government leaders and politicians I speak to, they are very well aware of the fact that the Europeans have to, they're on their own. So it is a strange game of trying to keep the Americans on board, or the Americans, the American, in this case, Donald Trump, and also become more reassured, self-assured that Europe should be in charge of its own defense and no longer rely on the Americans. But that's a very harsh reality and truth to admit if you relied for 80 years on the Americans, of course.
Definitely. Let me just bring you on this one. This show of, this new future, which the Europeans have been contemplating for quite a long time. And we've seen the European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen saying that Europe has finally woken up to Russia's war against Ukraine. There is a generational shift in the continent's security position now. One of the big problems in the last few days we have noticed is the personal relationship between the German Chancellor Friedrich Merz and Emmanuel Macron going in different directions in response to the conflict that's been dominating the headlines for the last couple of days, namely the Israeli-Iran conflict. But these two men, Merz and Macron, have stepped up together in the last 24 hours, haven't they? Throwing a sort of a narrative of mutual love towards the world via the Financial Times.
Well, of love, I don't know, of war maybe. they signed together an op-ed pledging to increase their defense budget and to work on European defense, which has been Macron's plan since 2017. It's interesting because Emmanuel Macron is often presented in France as the president of en même temps. You know, he always sees both sides. But one thing that he's never changed his mind about since 2017 is that he really believes that Europe needs its own defense forces. And this has been something that he's been advocating for. I don't think he foresaw the situation that France and Europe, the European Union is in right now. But, you know, he's been proven right in a way by obviously Donald Trump refusing to spend as much as they used to, refusing to provide the so-called transatlantic defense mechanism that we had before.
And this is what's saying with you, Daphne, what NATO members are expected to approve a boost in defence spending. So this plays once again, it plays into what Donald Trump wants everybody to do. He wants everybody else to pick up the bill. But at the same time, as you say, this is what Macron has been wanting for a long time. Do you think he will get his way?
I don't think we have any choice anymore, right? That we had a cushion that was quite helpful before, but in this very specific case and in this very specific situation where there is Russia and Ukraine, but obviously there's the Middle East, now, Iran, Israel, the United States. Obviously, Europe needs to have its own defense line. So I do think that in terms of cooperation, he will find countries that are more open to his ideas, even though, Europe as a project that beyond an economic project has always been a bit difficult to sell to everyone.
And coming back to you briefly, Stefan, as you stand in front of the King's Palace waiting for President Trump to arrive, we've been talking about Emmanuel Macron just then and the initiative that he is taking, but there has been quite a lot of public toing and froing between him and Donald Trump. I think last week when Donald Trump disappeared at top speed from the G7 summit in Canada, Emmanuel Macron was talking about the possibility that he'd gone back to Washington to negotiate a ceasefire, something which Donald Trump batted straight back when he talked about, when he conducted his diplomacy online. And he said whether it was a voluntary trip back to Washington or not, Emmanuel is always wrong. Stay tuned. I mean, how's that going to go down over dinner tonight, Stefan?
Well, I think, that's a complicated question. I think the general attitude of the Europeans will be to ignore more and more Donald Trump. Of course, that is not possible tonight because it's a very informal dinner. There will be about 66 guests sitting at 9 round tables, so the setting is quite intimate. There will be opportunities of discussions, intimate discussions, not negotiations necessarily, but more shaping of personal relationships. I'm not sure whether Emmanuel Macron will sit at the same table as the American president, but maybe he will. And then, it's Donald Trump. So one day he says Emmanuel Macron has everything wrong, and then tomorrow he has everything right, and then the day after tomorrow another one will take the blame. So I think the time to take Donald Trump seriously is long over. The only problem is that the European politicians and heads of government are too afraid to admit, and maybe also too opportunistic, because they really know that they rely on American defense forces for at least the next 3-4 years, because that will take the time for Europe to get its defense industry on track, to make sure that they can defend the continent themselves. So the Europeans are in a very difficult position because they feel they can no longer rely on the Americans, but nobody really dares to admit that this relationship has failed a long time ago already.
Stefan de Vries, outside the King's Palace in The Hague, European Affairs correspondent for Euronews and BNR News Radio. Thank you so much for joining us on The Daily. Delphine Dilly and Daphne Denis, who wants to talk about putting 66 guests around round tables in this evening's dinner? I mean, that just made my stomach flip about. That must be the world's worst job tonight, being the table planner, right?
And considering it's an intimate setting.
Right. How intimate are we talking here?
I mean, I don't know. Can you imagine? I don't know. Do you see Emmanuel Macron next to Donald Trump? I wouldn't. But sometimes they enjoy each other. They seem to get along a lot of the time. So.
They're quite chilled in the Netherlands. Right. Let's talk about another big event, which we don't know what the bill for the NATO summit is, but we now know what the bill is for last year's Olympics. I mean, let's just talk about the fact that I think we've all been there, that you have a big event to organise, big party, dinner for 66 world leaders, a promise to keep an eye on the purse strings. Yeah, we'll do this. This will be fine. It'll be manageable. And then before you know it, you're having the absolute time of your life and the budget is just exploded. And well, this is what appears to have happened with last year's Olympics. The auditors have placed the final bill at 3 times the original sum of 2 billion euros. At the moment, it looks like it's 6 billion euros. Now, there's been a bit of toing and froing about how accurate this is, but first, let me come to you, Delphine. I mean, it was an amazing, amazing time, wasn't it? I mean, are the French going to swallow 6 billion euros and say it was worth it?
I mean, it's very bad of me, but I wasn't there during the Olympics because I thought it was going to be super complicated. So I have this like really bad feeling and guilt and shame of having fled Paris during the Olympics. But because let's remind each other like how the publicity and how in the public transportation, everybody was like talking about get ready for the Olympics, work from home, get your travel ready. It was, I'm not even kidding. It was a bit, the way they organized it was a bit scary for the people. So I must admit that as a grumpy or snobbish Parisian person, I was like, I'm not staying there. But then I started like watching the ceremony, number one, and then I felt really bad because I was like, this is magnificent. Number two, I started hearing all the stories of all these people having fun. But so I just felt bad. And the only day I came, I don't know, Daphne, if you were there, but there was a vibration in the city that I had never encountered. And I believe, and that is because Parisians were out of town. I think it was because mostly it was the friendly, sort of like laid back sports addict or, people who were just wanting to watch sports in a very chill way. And it became this place of, I don't know, I just felt the vibration was different. Now, as far as the, how much it costs, for me, I mean, personally, the way it has affected me is that we were talking with Daphne is the infrastructures and the subway finally connected suburbs. So line 14 is not just taking you to Orly Airport. It's finally connected so many suburbs, and that's what we're lacking the most as far as transport infrastructures. I live in the suburbs, actually. I call myself a Parisian, but that's not entirely true. But
you can now, thanks to 914.
But yeah, and so this is one of the things that they said they did for the Olympics, but we all, people in the suburbs benefited from it. Everybody in Paris benefited from it. So I don't know. My main concern is the thing I never believed, honestly, was how to make that Seine, the river Seine, clean. And I would have never accepted to swim in this. That's another story.
Daphne, you were here for the Olympics.
Yes, indeed, I was here.
And do you, having seen what you saw and having enjoyed what you saw from within and having seen what the rest of the world saw, would a threefold increase in the bill actually be justifiable? Because it was that feeling that this was the party to all and end all parties, and it was the moment when Paris, which arguably didn't need the publicity, suddenly found itself just looking extra beautiful and extra fun.
I don't think a beautiful party is worth the overspending. However, what Delphine is saying is correct, I think, and the dispute that they're having is around that. It's around the idea that some of the spending is counted as Olympic spending when it's really about improving the city overall. And we have been able to enjoy a city that is indeed more manageable in terms of transport. Before the Olympics, it was really complicated. There was a huge lack of metro drivers, for instance, and they gave them a raise. So if that's the extra spending, if it's giving a raise to people who are, helping us in the transport, I don't know if I consider it as part of the Olympics, unless then they lowered their pay again. But if it's just, making the city more manageable and better infrastructure, then I'm okay with it. If it was just for the spectacle and for the people who were there for those weeks, then I'm not sure I'm okay with it.
So this sounds all a little bit unfair, doesn't it? Because, the reasons that you have both given that have been given by the grant, the auditors for this massive overspend don't necessarily chime with what the public perception of the event will be. But once you start to throw around enormous numbers like 6 billion euros, that stuff's really hard to unpick, because we will read the headlines and we will walk away and we'll just go, my goodness, that cost 3 times more. So arguably it's a bit of a shame here, because the damage is already done, isn't it?
Also, I feel like some of the people were not recognizing their city. I think there was the few Parisians who were there who were felt like, the security also. I'm currently thinking about how much security there was, which created this sort of Emily in Paris image of Paris, like Emily's in sportive Paris image, where everybody was like, oh, it was so safe, and it was so safe. And I mean, that's good. I'm not saying, but it created I'm sorry to say it, like as much as I'm glad it was safe, the amount of restrictions that there were for actual people living there was a bit tricky to understand. You had to look at maps and understand where you had to go, and you had to look at the Daily Le Monde and to understand were you in the red zone or not the red zone. So I feel like it was sometimes made out in the long run probably for the Parisians, but during that time it was made a bit without us. And it was sold as this incredible party for everyone. But I felt that it was during the time we felt, people in Paris felt a bit left out. I don't know.
You wanted to say something, Daphne?
Yeah, I think that was mainly around the opening ceremony. But I do think that it was interesting. I went to the opening ceremony. It was pouring down with rain, and the opposite was my impression was that this show was made more for people who were watching TV than for people who were actually present in the flesh under the non-stop rain. But I do think that there's a level of truth to it. I think that the ceremony was made and that the Olympics were made to cater to a more international audience.
You're listening to the Monocle Daily with me, Emma Nelson, coming to you live from Studio 5 here in Paris at 16 Rue Bachaumont, Monocle's new outpost. Joining me around the very lovely table, Delphine Dilly and Daphne Denis. Delphine, a story that you wanted to raise our awareness of, which is China, loving to watch its citizens eat, not just what they're eating, but actually the amount they're eating. And there are shows that are popping up online. You've got a row of empty-tummied contestants ready to sort of stuff themselves silly at great speed with, I don't know, barrels of noodles and mountains of hamburgers and enough dumplings to fill a bath. Well, now the Chinese authorities have said, no more, thank you. Enough's enough. You've filled your tummy, now stop and go home. I've never watched one of these things. I've seen stills of them, but has anyone actually sort of stuck it to the end to see what actually happens when it's last man or last woman standing?
My son is 14 years old and is a big, of course, he reads mangas and all he thinks about is going to eat ramen. It's his passion in life. He just searches the best ones in Paris. So, of course, one guy told him, oh, you should watch this show. And I couldn't watch, I watched a minute of it. I thought it was incredible. He thought
that's French restraint.
That's French restraint, yeah. But that's also, I was never able to watch any of the contests of the hot dog in America. Like any contest with food is, I mean, maybe it's our French upbringing and we eat food and I mean, I don't know.
You stop at portion control. Yes, the French are the champions of portion control, but not necessarily the Chinese. And the fact that, I don't know, I've watched a couple of these signs and Daphne, there's a kind of inherent sadness to them. I don't know why. Because people who overeat are generally unhappy about something, but actually to want to go and do it on the telly is something else.
Yeah, I mean, I think they're quite fascinating. There was a moment when I got a little bit into it. I have to say, I didn't watch the whole thing, but I was, for instance, I was very interested in the fact that some of the biggest champions of this in the United States, because it's not only China, the United States has some big competitors. These people are skinny, they train their bodies to be able to take a huge intake, but obviously then they take it back out. So
that's so discreet. Well done, Daphne.
I tried to say it in the nicest possible way. But it's kind of interesting that we have this impression of these competitive eaters and we wonder why they do this. But I think they treat it as a competition, which I find strange. But I saw China was also banning spice eating contests, which would mean stopping hot ones, which I'm completely against because it's my favorite show. It exists in France, it exists in the United States, and I think it's fantastic.
Enlighten us for those who've not watched it.
It's an American show originally that has then been translated in other countries, including France, where people, celebrities are interviewed while eating increasingly spicy stuff and then, reacting to it. So some of them cry, some of them don't, some of them enjoy it. But, this is my dream. I would love to do that. And I I disagree with China. I think it's quite a fun thing to watch.
If you're listening in China, if you're listening and you are the organisers of Hot Ones, there's a very willing French woman here in Paris who's up for a chili or two. Look, the way that Daphne's has described it there, Delphine, suddenly puts a really lovely twist on this, that actually you watch it for fun, people stuff themselves with dumplings for fun, and then everything's fine, and then suddenly the Chinese come along and said you will not have any more fun. Is there any sort of finger wagging in this, do you think?
Well, but maybe I'll be less fun than Daphne, but I feel like if as she put it, if they eat it and then it gets out of their body, it's sort of like encouraging eating disorders. I mean, it's just like unhealthy. I mean, that's my problem. Like,
and
that's
on
my
the television as well.
That's my first reaction to it, and I just feel like that's personal. I cannot watch people eating like this in this manner. The spicy thing, however, I do think is fun because you see famous people or people you admire or whatever being vulnerable suddenly because of having tears, and that is fun. But I think it's not overeating. It's a bit different. It's kind of like provoking a small reaction, but it's not. I must say, I'm sorry. I still don't understand. I'm not going to support China, but I still don't understand this tendency to.
I mean, I do think it's unhealthy. Of course.
Of course you do. Yeah.
Ask your 14-year-old son. He might have a sort of a different matter when you bring home 37 kilos of dumplings. Look, let's move on to another sort of idea of fun. But this something that the French have really, really got absolutely done brilliantly. I'm talking about France's Fête de la Musique. It is absolutely the stuff of legend. It goes back to 1981, everybody. The Culture Minister Jacques Lang appointed the composer Maurice Fleuret as the country's director of music and dance. Fantastic. Every country should have a director of music and dance. It would change the world. And Fleuret came up with an idea, and he wanted music, and bad translation here, but music to be everywhere, but a concert to be nowhere. And so we now have an event, an annual event, in which French people just pour into the streets, into bars, into restaurants, and encounter all kinds of music. Well, this year, what has been up until now considered a wholly national event has gone global, and thousands of people from all over the world flooded into France and to enjoy, and I'm quoting Maurice Fleuret there, to get drunk on music, which is just the most gorgeous, gorgeous idea. My memory of the Fête de la Musique was about 30 years ago. I was in a flat above a world music store, and it seemed to be the focal point for all of France's didgeridoo players. And we started off on a reasonably quiet afternoon, and then before I knew it, there were 1,000 didgeridoo players in my street, which, as you can imagine, causes a little bit of a rumble. So it did have a sort of slightly overwhelming effect on me at the time, being held hostage by all these men with and women with enormous didgeridoos. You both grown up with Fête de la Musique, haven't you? So as a child, what was it for you, Delphine? Was it the massive international gig that it's become?
Well, I grew up in a much smaller town in Champagne, so it was the scale was completely different. But it's I think it's sort of a ritual where parents, even though I think it is quite dangerous, but still, parents sort of let you go during the Fête de la Musique. So it's a bit. Okay, you're not allowed to go to clubs, but you can go to la Fête de la Musique. So I can feel that, kids and teenagers in particular are all outside and together. So that for me is a memory of extreme freedom and just celebrating, as we were saying earlier on the show, summer. This means summer is beginning. We usually end our exams around this time as well. And so there is this sense of freedom and this sense of people who play badly their instruments are allowed to play it. And then next to it, there's going to be this really great DJ. And then, so there is this sense of, I think that we do lack a little bit in France of some kind of like freedom. In many ways.
The drunkenness of music. I mean, that idea that actually if you are, wherever you come from, wherever you are in France, if you want to find 1,000 didgeridoo players, you can. If you want to go out and pretend that you're in a nightclub because you're 13 years old and your mum says no, you can. But at the heart of it is Fleuret's desire to expose everybody to music. Is that what you experienced growing up, Daphne?
Well, growing up, I was not living in Paris. I was living in Spain, so I did not encounter it immediately. But yes, my first memories of the Fête de la Musique are always like a huge party, it being really fun, being able to walk around and meet people one place, go to another, change sets. Currently, it's become much bigger, so I think you sort of oscillate between different spots but quite close to one another, because there were so many people who came this year. Actually, lots of people from the UK came this year. I think thinking it was a little bit like the Notting Hill Carnival, which, you know, in a way, it's kind of a giant block party. But I think now there's so many people in Paris, which is a small city, very dense, that you kind of go between less spots. But it's still like a beautiful party. It is really fun. I think this year was special because there was an event organized by the Minister of Culture, Rachida Dati, France Music Week, which culminated in the Fête de la Musique. So there was a double sort of event that led to, you know, it being so like flamboyant.
And are we happy, Delphine, that the French, or are the French happy actually, that we've all discovered your super summer secret?
I don't know. I mean, I think personally, I feel that we do like a festival and a festive spirit in France in general. I've gone to Spain a lot, and it felt like I was in Barcelona, like really late at night. Like I just loved having so many people in the streets. I didn't love the fact that it was so dirty at the end of the night, but I think, and I tried as much as I could as well to not be afraid, because I know that sometimes La Fête de la Musique can also get out of control with lots of alcohol. So there, but I did feel actually quite happy in that people came to Paris as if it was a place to be. For once, I would say, for the party.
So we have run out of time on tonight's episode of the Monocle Daily. Thank you for joining us, Delphine and Daphne. Daphne, before we came on air, I said, right, give us, if we didn't make it to Paris or to anywhere in France this weekend to celebrate the Fête de la Musique, if you had to introduce us to a piece of music which we might not have heard, I mean, the Monocle playlist is stuffed with French crackers. Let's be absolutely honest about this one. What would you play us?
So I offered, because I have some experience on the Monocle playlist, so I said, this is not a new song, but it is a good reference. Johann Papa Constantino, I said it wrong, but Les Mots Bleus, which is a sort of his version of a very old song, and it's quite beautiful.
Should we have a little listen?
Comme chaque soir je l'attends, elle me sourit. Il faudrait que je lui parle à tout prix. Je lui dirai les mots bleus, les mots qu'on dit avec les yeux. Parler me semble ridicule. Je m'élance et puis je recule devant une phrase inutile.
I hope Fernando Augusto Pacheco is listening to that, because that's going straight on the Monocle playlist if I have my way. I mean, Delphine, you loved that piece of music as well, didn't you?
Oh yeah, I danced to it right away. It's in one of my favorites in my playlist. Definitely.
Daphne, thank you, Daphne.
Classic indeed.
Absolutely. And that brings us to the end of today's programme. The warmest of thanks to my panellists, Delphine Dilly and Daphne Denis, and also to Stefan de Vries, who joined me on the line from The Hague. Today's show was produced by Tom Webb. Our sound engineer back in London was Lily Austin. I'm Emma Nelson here in Studio 5 in Paris. I'll be back with the Monocle Daily at the same time tomorrow as we hit day 3 of French Week. But for now, goodbye. Thank you for listening. Au revoir.